Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy Bernie here along with Pete.
Yo, what's up, guys?
And today, guys, of course, we got to talk about it. Blake Griffin, the Pistons. What do we think about it? We'll let you know here on The Charge.
James. LeBron James all the way in. Here comes Simmons the other way. 3-on-2. Simmons eludes the defender and lays it in with that. Certainly the length altered that shot out of the quick steps.
Bernie, let's jump straight into it. We wanted to give this a night to we wanted to ruminate on this a little bit, think about it. We didn't want to just give the gut reaction because I know for a fact that the second I saw this, my reaction was very different than I feel now.
Yeah, I think so too, thinking about it. Even just thinking about it up until this point, I was just kind of flip-flopping back and forth. I told you last night I changed my opinion. I keep changing it. It's one of those trades where you have to analyze it by what each team is doing and by what you want to see, or like what you could potentially see from this trade implication. But for you guys that don't know, of course, Blake Griffin got traded to the Detroit Pistons. The Clippers are going to get Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Boban, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick. Meanwhile, the Clippers will be getting Blake Griffin and Willie Reed.
Yes. And those picks are lightly protected. I think just the first-round pick is protected.
Yeah, I think it's top 4 protected. So if the Pistons land in the top 4, it's theirs.
There's probably no way that's going to happen either. So, I mean, they're not very good. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, but they're not going to keep that pick. Let's jump into it, Bernie. Well, let's just give our gut reaction first. What did we think about this trade when we first saw it?
When I first saw it, I was a little bit surprised. I think a lot of people were, including, analysts and NBA people that followed the NBA. They were a little bit surprised because, we always thought that the two guys that were for sure on the trade block and were going to be traded first was DeAndre Jordan and Lou Williams. Like that was the whole feeling around the NBA, going from ESPN to Fox Sports, whatever TV affiliate you like to watch, whether it's the Charge or not. That's who we thought was going to be the first two guys were going to be gone. This, to me, probably one of the bigger surprises in the NBA.
In the last couple of years.
Trade-wise,
for sure.
Trade-wise, yeah.
At first, I was surprised. I honestly thought we were going to hear Doc Rivers was fired last night, too. That was my first instinct, was that this was really like they were blowing it all up and that Doc was gone. And that, I still think that DeAndre and Lou Williams are gone.
Yeah.
But I thought last night for sure we were going to hear Doc was gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm surprised. Glad the guy got to keep his job. He's done a great job this year, and we've kind of expressed what we feel about Doc Rivers so far on this channel sometimes, and I think deep down he's a good coach. He just loses focus. So I'm glad he's keeping his job because I think he has done a really good job in the last 2 months, but I thought for sure he was gone. So that was my instant reaction, and I thought it was a very fair trade when I first saw it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure now. I still think short term this is a fair trade.
Right, I got you.
This season, I think that the pieces that were moved around, it's hard to deny that, the Pistons, they were already going to get rid of Bradley. Tobias Harris is a above average player.
Mm-hmm.
And then, their pick would be late lottery at best.
Yeah, for sure.
And Boban just is not the best.
Serviceable, not
the best. So I felt like getting an all-star, probably top 30 player in the league for that amount of pieces and a mid-range pick was a good deal. Now I'm not so sure. I don't know if we want to jump straight into why we're not feeling so sure about this trade. Where do you stand now on the trade?
Where I stand now is, before we get into just Blake Griffin himself, I'm probably going to say this now. I think this is Jerry West, who is now the consultant and someone that manages the team. Mm-hmm. I think this is his way of getting rid of Lob City. I think everyone that was part of that Lob City 2010, when Doc Rivers came in, they're all going to be gone, including Doc Rivers. I think he's not making it. He's either making it to the end of the season, he's done, or he's not making it to the end of the season, because I think Jerry West sees what he needs to do to build a team. And of course, he did give Blake Griffin that extension, $105 million or however many it was. He saw that, but then he realized, I can't build around this. This is not going to work. This was what year Blake Griffin is in right now. Since he's been in the league,
I don't know, 9, I think.
9 or 10 seasons.
I think he's 9 seasons in.
9 seasons in. Haven't really seen that much improvement in his shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't seen really any improvement in his defense.
No, his defense is atrocious.
Yeah. So to me, I think the perfect analogy of Blake Griffin, and I'm going to have to agree with it a little bit, even though, I'm not really a Blake Griffin guy, is that he's like the Hummer of the NBA. A lot of flash, a lot of big things, but
an extravagant player. It's not necessarily
it's not a need. It's more of a extra. It's extra. Some of the stuff he does is extra, and it's not. And I'm not denying that he's a good player because I think he is in his own right. Offensively, I mean, he's averaging more points right now than his career, 22.6 compared to 21.6. So I do think he's still a good offensive guy. I just think the stuff you need to win championships, it's just not there.
Yes, him as your star player. And just so, because now we're going to have a couple different sides of people who are going to be a little upset at us.
Yeah.
It's going to be the new Pistons Blake fans. And then
Probably.
it's going to be the old school Clippers fans. So I want to make it clear that for me personally, I'm not going to speak for Bernie. I actually think Blake is probably in the top 28 players in the league.
Mm-hmm.
He's really good. And honestly, I've seen a lot of strides forward in his game this year as far as being a skilled player, not so much just a flashy guy. Because if you're watching the Clippers, Blake Griffin is not necessarily dunking over people anymore. He's just not capable of doing it anymore just because his injuries have been all lower body injuries.
Yeah.
So when I watch his game sometimes, like, he looks really nice in the post and he can shoot, and he's kind of revamped his offensive game this season when he's been healthy, and that's the biggest problem with Blake.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you know what you're getting defensively in Blake, and that's just basically nothing, So offensively, you're getting a skilled guy who can sometimes put in a big flashy moment. He's a big name.
Yeah.
On and off the court, like, he does very, big things. But that being said, the injuries are just way too much to overlook. And considering how much money he's making and set to be making in the next few years, like, I just want to read this. $32 million next year, 34.4 2019, 36.8 in 2020, and then 39 almost in 2021, and that's a player option. He's not declining the player option. It's almost $40 million.
Yeah.
He's already getting injured almost every other week at this point with something.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's a little bit harsh, but maybe like once a month he has some injury that keeps him out a couple of games. You can't pay a guy $40 million to not play at least 75 games, in my opinion. And what this trade boils down to me is Stan Van Gundy is trying to save his job.
Yeah, I think the GM and him are trying to save his job, or their jobs.
Well, he's basically the GM too.
Yeah.
This is his last-ditch effort to, persuade Detroit to keep him. Because they had that little moment in the beginning of the season where people were like, wow, Detroit is actually for real. Stan Van Gundy's doing a good job. And then it just fell apart like it does every season.
Mm-hmm.
And Blake Griffin is not going to fix all their problems. But they want not only to bring seats into their new arena that's not getting anywhere near being filled every night.
Yeah.
But they also just want to make a push for the Eastern Conference playoffs, which I honestly think they're going to make now that they have him. And that's not saying that they're good, because I really think that this actually, in the long run, makes them no different as a team. Like, their problems are still kind of deep-seated. And I personally, looking at the way that Blake and Andre Drummond play, I don't see how those guys are going to mesh together.
Yeah, I think the last point I'll talk about in terms of like just Blake Griffin, and then we'll go into the trade in a different video. Just Blake Griffin himself, he's only played one season, 82 games, and that's his rookie year, or when he came back from that injury, ACL. So to me, Blake Griffin, it's one of those things where, like, I want to root for the guy because I think he possesses some talent. And there's things in there that I could see, like, if you just worked on this a little bit, I think you can improve. But the problem is that he is not a guy that you can build around as your star player.
No, he just doesn't do enough things on the court
Yeah.
to be the star guy.
It's also terms of leadership as well. I mean, he's getting into fights with guys, not even NBA players. He's getting in fights with workers for the team, with the Clippers.
Like what was that guy? Like a trainer?
Like either a trainer or someone that equipment manager.
Something like that.
Something like that, where it just seems to me that I just question Blake Griffin as like the guy that you build around, and it's obvious that now Blake Griffin is the number one guy in Detroit. Even though you could say Andre Drummond, but I think Blake Griffin is like your number one go-to guy now.
Probably, yeah. And that kind of my last point I wanted to make about Blake before we move on to other stuff about this whole trade and what it does to the league is just, and you said it kind of well, is just his character. You know, you have to take into consideration that Blake is not just a basketball player. He has an overall image. And sometimes, as far as being an NBA player, that has rubbed other players the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen what it did with Chris Paul.
Right.
Those guys hate each other now. They hated playing with each other and being on the same team. And just in general, Blake Griffin has not necessarily been the ideal teammate that people want. You know,
exactly.
And it's been very well documented in his time in the league. And I wonder not only if that affected why they were so willing to trade him, not only his contract and his injuries, but I think like seeing what happened with that Houston game, and Jerry West is probably a very old school basketball player and probably a respectful dude, I would assume too, you know.
Yeah.
Not to say that Blake isn't, but maybe he sees stuff like that and he's like, this isn't what basketball is supposed to be. You know, we don't want fights every other game with this guy fighting old teammates that he turned into enemies. Like, we just don't need that on our team. And then you take into consideration, is Blake really a guy that is going to bring in new free agents? And I don't think so. You know, because then think of the friendship that LeBron and Chris Paul have, right? The Clippers want a chance to get LeBron James in this upcoming offseason. LeBron says, hey, Chris, how was it, playing with Blake Griffin? I would never play with him again in my entire life. He was a nightmare to work with. Of course, LeBron isn't going to go play for the Clippers. Just the character, I think, is probably one of the biggest parts of this whole Blake Griffin trade, you know?
Yeah. So I think it's time we just move on to the trade portion of this Blake Griffin talk.
Let's do it.